My name is Kenya, and I am the co-founder of the Women's Network. And the Women's Network is a place where we are creating a vibrant sisterhood of happy, healthy, holy women. And together, we believe that we can write the story of what it means to be a woman in the 21st century. And our founder, Lois Shannon, is in California today, and we're hoping that she will jump on and join us at some point. But I'll be leading us in this discussion with Virginia. And I'm so excited to have you, Virginia, because I think this topic is really such an important one, and one that's been so relevant to our collective and individual story as women over time. And I think that we've had a lot of external freedom over the last century, which is we've, as women fought hard for. And now I think that we're fighting hard for our internal freedom. And that's what I think we're going to talk about today. And so I'd like to just do a little landing for everybody before we really officially start. And then Virginia, I'd love for you to introduce yourself some more. So let's just start with a few deep breaths, and if you'd like to close your eyes or soften your gaze, we'll just land in this space together. Just take a few deep breaths. And imagine that the air is coming in through your feet and moving up through your legs, your hips, your spine, your chest, your throat, and up to the crown of your head. And then release and feel it all going back down into the earth. And just spend a couple minutes doing this together. I invite you to feel the space really opening up in your body and just becoming really present here in this moment for this discussion we're about to have. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. So Virginia, I would love for you to introduce yourself, but I'll just start by saying, I really admire your work, and to introduce Virginia briefly to everyone, she's a writer and a coach and an entrepreneur, and was in the corporate world for quite some time, and she has a lot of really beautiful wisdom to share about freedom and authenticity. And so Virginia, yes, please tell us a little bit about yourself. And I thought what might be fun is if maybe you also just told us a little bit about what 16-year-old Virginia was like, so we get a little bit of a backstory about you.
Okay. My name is Virginia Nava. I'm originally from Mexico, and I moved in here with my husband some years ago. I'm the CEO of Transformative Power. I have a child, a 2-year-old, and I'm also an entrepreneur. So my mission in life is really helping people unwrap the essence of who they are. And what I have found for my own self is that is found when I'm really free to express myself and who I am authentically, and then really free to play and to love and to have joy and really experience life. And my 16-year-old girl, Virginia, she was really girly, and then at the same time, I had this feminine aspect of myself. She loved like super beautiful dresses and like having her hair beautifully made and colors. And she was really warm and really caring for her friends. And she loved to write letters to her friends and receive letters from her friends. She had a diary that she used to show her emotional aspects of herself. And yeah, and then she had two brothers that she really helped her to be more able to share and express herself more, and then be playful with them. So yes, I think it was both really feminine, but also had a rebellious aspect of herself. So yes.
I love that. I think the rebellious nature in ourselves is such an important sort of fuel for the fire for our freedom. I think we have to be a little rebellious if we want to find our freedom. So I love that you had that from being just a teenage girl. So I'd just like to just quickly also introduce anyone who's on here to this platform and how we like to run it at the Women's Network. So if you have any questions for Virginia or myself, please type them in the comment box on the side, and we'll get to as many as we can. And at the end, we'll also invite people to come into one of these seats, these open seats, and you can ask questions on there too live. So we'll get to questions at the end for the most part. And so, Virginia, my first question for you is, what is freedom? How do you define that, and how do we find it in life?
Well, I think freedom is a really personal question, and I think it's almost your own personal quest. And I do not know that I can answer freedom for each person, but I can say for myself, in my journey, at the beginning, I thought it was a freedom of having an environment where I could be myself, where I could be joyful and like feel really fully alive. And I felt like I had to create that place in the world where that part of myself could be expressed. But as I was going through this process myself, I realized that freedom is in you. And that really the outside of it is secondary. And that the primary aspect was for myself to be really able to know who I am and to really be able to differentiate between who I am versus who others want me to be. And I didn't really realize how much influences I have in my life that unconsciously guide some of my decisions in my life that weren't really in alignment with myself. And when I was able to really recognize the difference between who I am by nature versus who others want me to be, I was able to really start making choices from who I am. And that's the moment I started to becoming really free. And then the second part of my freedom process was realizing that that freedom wasn't for me and that that freedom had a greater expression than myself. And that's how I started really writing the books, because I realized that my lessons were not just for me. They were for other people like me. So yeah, I think for me, that has been the process of really differentiating the freedom from outside to an inner freedom. And the most important aspect for me was to really know what my constellation was. What is my guiding light, to be able to make decisions from that place so I could be in constant freedom. And the other one that guided me to this, it was that one day I made a PowerPoint. I love like art and stuff like that. So I made a PowerPoint presentation putting everything I loved in it. Everything, like from jewelry to every single thing I loved. It didn't matter, anything had to be in a box. And what I realized is that I have put those things like as hobbies, and I really haven't integrated them in my life. And then I sat and asked myself, how can I live a life where most of these things that I love are present in my life every day?
I think that's gorgeous. And I think that this is the struggle that we have, especially as women, is to find a balance of all of these different things. And I think where often we can get lost is when we feel like we need to meet other people's expectations in order to remain free. And I think what I hear you saying is that actually we really need to get really honest with ourselves and ask ourselves some sometimes difficult questions, sometimes easy questions, but we really have to question ourselves and get really real about, okay, what do I actually want to do with this life? So I think the most valuable thing that we have in this life is our time. And so balancing our time is difficult. And so, I mean, I'm wondering how you were able to find that balance and how you were able to find your freedom by finding a balance of all those things that you decided that you loved and were important to you.
To be honest with you, I don't know if balance is what I have. I think there are times where I have had perfect balance, and like there's a perfect environment for meditation and doing things, and sitting and writing and seeing a client. But there are times where things happen, a kid gets sick and you have to take care of him, and you have a client that needs more help, So I believe it's more of a choice than balance. So if we have, say you have a 10-hour day, right? And if between that 10-hour day, all of the 10 hours are done for somebody else's, and it's not having anything that really brings you joy and bring you back to that self-expression, then you actually start losing yourself. And I think that's what happened to me. I was, working and meeting all of these people's expectations. And even though I love what I did, I really didn't have enough time to play, enough time to go and walk in the trail and see nature, and go back to do jewelry, do things that even though they seem that they do not add value to, say, my book, but the truth is they do, because they connect me with that creative aspect and they help my writing. So the thing I realized for me is like I needed to create the space for myself, and I needed to say, okay, this week is tough, so I have an hour. I have 10 minutes a day. Like, for example, right now I love dancing, right? So I have a baby, so he goes in the bathtub, and then I sit with him, and he's really cute and he loves to splash. And I put a song that is 2 minutes, and then I dance to it. And then I'm kind of like a performer to him, and I'm doing something I love, and I'm giving myself permission to self-express, and yet I'm still doing another activity as a mom I have. So I believe freedom is an active choice of saying, these are the things I love, this is the space I have currently right now, and these are the things I want to do. And I think eventually you may be called to do something bigger, and that's when you are true, like you're totally in the right path. Like sometimes in those moments you have to make a difficult choice, and then you have to say, am I willing to let go of the life as I know it to experience a bigger life? And in that moment, it's just, to me, it is a leap of faith that you trust that that's what it is.
I think that the two words that really just stood out to me while you were speaking is permission and choice. And I think that they're both so integral to our freedom, because I think that we first have to give ourselves permission to make the choice. I think that often we can feel like we can't even do that. Like I'm not allowed to do that. I'm not going to allow myself to do that. I'm not going to allow myself to think about that. And that really can be a huge block between moving through into this other life that you're talking about, right? And I think what I also hear you say is that you really have to be willing to go into the discomfort of that, because often these choices that we make are scary and they're uncomfortable and there's a lot of fear around them. And I know for me in my life, I feel the fear come up when I'm really getting close to something that is what I really need to be doing, and that is really aligned with who I am. For some reason, there seems to be a lot of resistance. And so I'm wondering how you managed to move through that fear to the other side and start your own business, move away from corporate. Like, how did you move through that fear?
I think for me, there were different type of examples. So when I left corporate, I really had to choose between the discomfort of not hearing my journey. Like, my journey started really quietly saying, Virginia, I want you to do something else. Virginia, I want you to do something else. And I literally started screaming at me, And then at that point it was really uncomfortable to hear that scream inside of me every day. And I had to choose between the discomfort of that scream and the discomfort of living my life as I knew it.
Mm-hmm.
And because the discomfort was louder inside, I really chose to have that comfort inside. And I made the choice from that place of knowing that inside I was being called to do something else. So from fear standpoint, for example, as an entrepreneur, I go through different kinds of fears, like the fear of rejection, the fear of being too authentic and weird, many fears, right? And then what I have found is that authenticity brings you real connection. And you really feel connected with somebody because you're really sharing something really deep from you. And the fear that I have gone through of rejection or what are people going to say have led me to realize that the more I share authentically, the more I am connected. And how I have gone through that fear is asking those fears from a space of love. Like if somebody that really loved me, like my mom or somebody like is really close to me, and I was telling her, hey, I have this really big fear about, what people are going to say about this book. So my mom will say, well, what if you can make a difference to one person's life? I'm like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. So then really fear, it's the focus of just seeing fear. But when you see behind the fear, the impact that you can do to someone by sharing something, the joy that you can have in your life, then the fear stays there, like it's in there, but it starts to become more like a character of a story, and is not the full story anymore.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that happens by just getting familiar with it, by really knowing what the fear is and acknowledging it? And because I think that for me, I sometimes have a lot of unconscious fears. I suddenly am in sort of reaction, kind of like an animal reaction to something, where I suddenly just get so afraid and I don't totally understand what it is. And so do you think it's a familiarity process of getting just really familiar and comfortable with our own fear, as uncomfortable as it is? Or do you think it's maybe something else?
I think it's different to everybody. For me, I can share what I do for myself. What I do is I journal about it. So I will put all my fears. So say I want to do a new project, and in that project, I don't feel like know something. And then that leads me to have a fear. So I will put all the fears down, and then I will ask if they are true. Mm-hmm. And then I'll be like, And then I realize that some of them are made up. They're not true. And some of it may be because I need help. And I need to have the vulnerability to ask someone to help me. So then I kind of like invite them over. Like I can share with you a story. Like one time I did this where I did this executive meeting. Sometimes I do these dates with myself where I will go out to eat Thai food or a tea. So I went to this Thai place that I love and sat with myself, and I invited over everybody with me. So I invited my inner critic. I invited my inner child. I invited all of them together to the table, and I hang out with them, and I just let them be, let them tell me, express themselves. And I just write down like, oh, inner critic is afraid of this. Inner child is afraid of this. And then I just realized that I could be the executive director of the process, and that I could actually invite them over, and my inner child could play. My inner critic could be, could even help me checking grammar, So I think when we see what we experience as having a purpose, and when we really are able to see it with us, then it started kind of not having as much of control over us, but it's just part of the process. So that to me was like taking that practice into my life in different aspects of my life, not just my business, but just as a mother, as a wife, as a friend, like in different aspects of my life that can be, applied.
Yes, I love that. I love that story because I think, oh my gosh, I mean, if we could really sit with all of our critics and our inner child and all of them, I mean, I think that really does give us a lot of freedom, because when we become aware, we then are empowered to make the choice, right? However big or small. And so I think I just want to kind of recap what we've discussed so far, right? So we're saying that freedom is an individual choice, yes, and we each have our own path to find it. And we really have to understand the fears in order to get through to the other side, which is where the freedom lies, and that there's a choice, there are choices around that. And I think I love what you were saying too, that the inner freedom that you've discovered is not just for yourself, but also a service to others. It's your calling in life. It's your North Star, however you want to say it. And I think that a question that I'm wondering is, what is really the cost of not finding our freedom? Because I think that people just think of it as, okay, well, this is just something for me, and because I'm losing all the expectations of other people, maybe it's selfish, but really what I feel is that our inner freedom is not only beneficial to us, but also beneficial to others. And so I'm wondering what the cost is in your eyes of not finding our freedom.
I think it's a big cost, not just for yourself, but humanity. I believe that we are all born as a gift, and that we all have something really valuable to offer. Like, think about a family, right? Like two brothers and sister, like they see the family dynamics as total different expressions. So they see it with their own eyes, with their own framework. So that's kind of how we are as individuals. We have our own expression. So we have this unique gift, this unique story, this unique lesson plan of all the things that we learn. And when we don't choose them, or don't choose the freedom, we actually start kind of like become numb and become like less motivated to be, part of life. And I think freedom, it's just amazing in the sense that it first gives you this reconnection with yourself. So it's like receiving the gift of being you first. And then when you experience it and you play with it and all that kind of thing, and it becomes fun, and then suddenly you realize, wow, what would life be if people have access to this, And then you don't really know, and then you start sharing, and then you start realizing it impacts people's lives. And that's kind of what happened to me. When I wrote my books, I have a guide that really felt like I could share my lessons. And I was like, really? I have a book? I didn't know it then. But I really felt that these lessons were not just for me. So I wrote them down, and then I shared them. And then as I having access to the books, for other people, some people have said, I just saw life different after reading the first chapter, and just helping people see their life as so important and so valuable for not just themselves, but their next generation's humanity was just so amazing to me that one chapter could do that, and for one person, maybe not for everybody. And I think that really led me to there's somebody else in the world that may need your lesson. And when you're now sharing that lesson, that somebody else is having to go through the same lesson that you already went through. So we're really taking away the opportunity for that person to also learn from us. So I really believe that's the cost of freedom. And that's obviously a personal belief from me. But, think about creativity. Think about painters that, are gone, and you still see the paintings and you still feel something. And that you have access to their creative expression through what they made. Mm-hmm. And they made enough for themselves because they actually put it out into the world so somebody else could see it. And I think that's really, really important. And there are many examples of why that's important in many areas of life.
I think that's so beautiful. And I love what you're saying about legacy, and how we can really stand on the shoulders of everyone who came before us by really truly embracing who we are and our gifts. And that's something that we are really talking a lot about at the Women's Network, is how do we stand on the shoulder of our ancestors and the women who came before us, and it's just so important to understand that lineage, and because we're connected, you know, we're all connected, I believe. And so my next question for you is really about the freedom to be who we're born to be. That's the title of this blab. And I think I hear you talk a lot about the playfulness of that. And I think when people start thinking about, okay, what's my passion? What's my gift? It gets very heavy and serious very quickly. And we're like, oh my gosh, there's so much wrong with the world. Like, how am I going to share my gift? And what is it? And how do I find it? And all these things. And I love that your book and everything you've been saying in this blab has a playful quality to it, which I think is the sort of inner child, right? The freedom to be who we're born to be. Because we really, I think as children, really understand the concept of freedom. We don't understand what it means not to be free. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just curious about your thoughts on that. And you know, you suggested the title for the blab, which I loved. And what made that come to your mind? And what are your thoughts on freedom as children and some of those other things I was just discussing?
Yeah, I really think freedom is being free. And being free is being. And that really took me a long time to get it, you know? Like, it was funny, like I was writing something last week. And the title that came, it was to be or not to be. That is the question, right? And I'm like, And I was like, before I really realized I didn't get it until now. And I was like, it is true. It's like just being. Like being, like think about a child, right? A child is just this. And they're all different. Like, you know, I have my kid, and then I have friends that have other children. And I one, you know, sits like in their little lap, like, you know, like a Zen Buddhist, you know. And then my kid moves around and is intrepid, you know. So the natural energy of us, it's like how we were like kids, you know. Like when I was a kid, I hated, like, you know, getting my hair like this. Like that was really tough for me, you know. So it was natural that I like my hair flowing, you know. So we have a natural way of being that could be warm, that could be maybe more with solitude, that it could be more playful, that it could be more intrepid, that it could be, and sometimes because we may live in a society or we may live in a house where that it's supported, we might be able to really nurture it and then grow to it and find a maturity to it. But sometimes we start losing it. And then when we really reconnect with that aspect of ourselves, like for me, okay, like I love papers and colors and stuff, right? So when I start doing like workshops and I put papers and I wrap them out and then I get people to get messy and I start really kind of like letting go of the result. Just me doing that activity is like going back to this playfulness of myself, right? Or when I give an advice to somebody, like not really an advice, but more like words of encouragement. I feel like when I was with my girlfriends, you know, and I was 10 and we were talking and, you know, so it was just actually just the way I am. And when I'm able to combine all those into oneness, they become really fun. And I think all of us have different things. Like I know this woman, she's so calm, you know, like she just, like her eyes look like so peaceful, you know. And I really don't know somebody like with that quality, but she just enters the room and it's like an ocean with a stillness. And that way of being alone in a room makes the room so calm. And you know, we forget that matters so much because it matters to our leadership. It matters to our leadership teams. It matters to the leadership of our household. It matters to our own personal leadership. And it really, it's just being that natural born leader of who we are, which I think is just some magic about it.
I completely agree. And I think that's also something we're talking a lot about at the network is the idea of being versus doing. And I think especially in the US, we've gotten so carried away with the doing, feeling like we have to do so much to prove our worth and prove to other people that we're worth something just to be alive. And I think that actually we're really worth something just simply in our being. Just the fact that we're here is a gift, like you said. And so I think really focusing on that being is so valuable and so needed right now, because that's how we're going to find more of a balance, I think, as a collective, especially as women. So I love everything that you just said, and that presence to me, that, you know, that's kind of what you're talking about, the woman with the ocean. It's presence, and that's sort of a hard concept to grasp, but I think when we see it, we know that that's what it is, right? And so I think I'd love for you to just to share maybe some tips or takeaways for anyone watching of how they could start their journey to freedom and cultivate some of that presence within them.
Yes. I have different tools. I wrote this little blog for myself. It's called Keys to Wholeness, because I had to simplify, okay, what helps me being in that whole place? And it really took me a while to be like, let me think about that. It felt really profound and deep and complicated. And then when I really went through, it wasn't, you know. So what so I wrote it, and I have it here. And so basically, it's the one part is going within. A lot of times we have a question and we ask our friend, another friend, somebody else, like we research it. And then we just go back and sit, literally just sit and close our eyes and ask the question. We get an answer. And it's just a magic. Stay grounded. I think everybody has different ways to be grounded. For me, I've noticed that nature helps me be grounded and really feel that I don't need anything. That like everything is already there. And with that feel of vastness, I feel like fully connected. Be love. I think when we're able to activate aspects of ourselves that we love, our creative ability, our play with our kid or with a dog, or with a family member, or with ourselves, or or like painting your nails or doing something for you, actually activates that heart aspect of love. And then sometimes we need to connect with our soul, knowing that our soul is really deep and is deeper than what the world expects. And that sometimes that the world has available to us, maybe we need to create something else to create our own space. And that's okay to do that. The other part I thought for me was really good. It was that I am not what I do, but I'm why I do it. So I often ask myself the question why I'm doing something before asking how I do something. Mm-hmm. And that is so important for me, because if I am doing something, it is not strong enough, that means that maybe I'm doing it because of external influences instead of really why I'm doing it from my own self. And then that just naturally leads to how. And especially for me, it's when I'm doing new things, like, being a mother or wanting to do something more broad with what I do. That leads me to a really how question. How am I going to figure out? But the more important question for me is, why am I doing it in the first place? Mm-hmm. And the other one I think is really, really, really important is sharing. Like, you have a little lesson, share with somebody. Because when you share, you actually expand. Like, it's like your heart expands. And it's like, really, when you share, you also receive what you share. And just take a break, like take moments. Like, a lot of us, like, I remember as a corporate, like I would not take a break to take lunch sometimes, and I'll be like on the go, like hours and hours in a day, and travel and come back. And what I needed, it was a break, like to just go and then just have 10 minutes of silence with myself, to hear myself. And I think as women, sometimes we forget that silence brings so much wisdom. Mm-hmm. And we are in the noise, and the noise is so loud that we stop hearing ourselves. And in that stillness and silence, we come back to who we are.
That is so beautiful and so aligned with so much of what we're doing at the Women's Network. We actually just had our first evening of pause, permission to pause here in Boulder on Tuesday, and we're going to be doing them every week because we think exactly what you just said, that there's so much power and wisdom in our silence that this is something we need to be tapping into regularly. I mean, throughout the day. And we're actually releasing an app as well that is going to help women remember to do that throughout the day, because it's easy to forget, because we do get wrapped up in, so much of the external world. We forget about our inner world, I think. And I think that's where a lot of our freedom comes from, is, like you said, from within. So I love this discussion, Virginia. Thank you so much for joining us. And I can't wait to talk with you more and for us to collaborate some more. And I just want to say, too, that I'm going to type in Virginia's website in the little chat box over here. And I'll also type in the Women's Network for anyone who's watching. And we'll also be sending out a replay to everyone as well. So thank you so much. And Virginia, we will be in touch soon. And also, just so everyone knows, we have an ebook of Virginia's free on the Women's Network. So if you're interested in that, please sign up for our newsletter and we can tell you how to do that. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.